The smartest, the most musical and the most versatile compressor ever. This is probably Unisum from Tone Project, and I'm going to talk about it today. To be honest, I feel guilty that I didn't check this one out sooner. I've skipped it because I felt I had already so many tools that I didn't need anything else in my toolbox. But because I'm right now writing a book on the art of compression, I thought it was worth pushing this further because I heard so many good things about it, so many people talking about it. I felt I had to give it a try. Also because since day one I started using Basslane from Tone Project, which amazed me. Then I started using Michelangelo, which is incredible, and recently Kelvin, which is probably one of my favorite distortion units as well. So there is a kind of story through Tone Projects doing really incredible, very musical and very well taught tools, and Unisum just follows this legacy. It blew my mind, basically. I started to look for my word, but it really blew my mind in what this tool could do, and by the depth of the reflections that Arun, the developer from Tone Project, put into this piece of equipment. It sounds incredible, it's super versatile, it allows you to do things that analog compressors do, things that digital compressors do, things that no other compressor does either. This is why I think it can be daunting at the first look. You might turn a knob and not hear or not understand what that knob is doing. And so we're going to try to untangle all this, but instead of just doing a kind of boring tutorial, what I want to do is to try to explain the musical impact or the reason why these features are embedded in the tool. Not talking about these features does that endpoint, but explaining why and what is the interest, what is the musical outcome you can get from those features. Don't forget, many of you are watching the videos but are not following the channel. This is always helping for the hard work I put in making these videos. So thank you in advance for that, and see you on the other side of the screen. Let's look at the plugin. All right, so let's start with the basics. We have Unisum here. Let's hide this for the moment. This is where the magic happens, but let's wait for a second. Okay, at start, we can look just at the left side of the plugin. It's linked to be proper doing left-right, so stereo mode, and we have the usual suspects: threshold, ratio, attack, release. This is nothing really fancy, right? This is something you should all already know, and if not, can always watch my introduction of the Compression Bible. I'm talking about this in detail. Then we have this little knob, which is a low cut filter. And why is this helpful? This is not something very unique. It's something we find in quite a lot of compressors. This is very handy, especially when doing mastering, because usually what happens is that in a mix there is more energy, more content, and more loudness in the low end. And so whatever you do, your compressor will usually react more to the low frequencies. And so rolling off the lows is a way to get the compressor. It's not filtering the sound you hear, it's filtering the detection signal, and it's a way to avoid excessive pumping on the lows, to avoid the compressor to react too much on the low end. It's a feature that I use quite a lot, but in a very delicate way, usually even just to shorten a bit the release time, because the lows are decaying for a long time. And so while already dialing just like 40-45 hertz as a low cut, you still can get the compressor to react on the kick drum, because sometimes, and even a lot of times in electronic music, this is something you want to imprint some groove to get some movement from the beat. So you want the compressor to react on that low end in electronic music. I mean, in quite a lot of cases of electronic music tracks. But because the kicks are decaying for a long time, it's sometimes hard to set up the release time in a proper way. And so having the sidechain just a bit higher helps to get rid of really that gunk, the low end long decays, and so you can get the compressor to pump a bit better and to groove a bit better by just removing a bit of the low frequency content in the sidechain signal. This is some basic action, but it's very handy. We have here a sidechain emphasis. So this is again for the sidechain signal, so not for the sound you hear, but for the detection path of the compressor. And this allows to boost one frequency. One of the most used case and old school uses of that was to select something between 4, 5, 6, 8 kilohertz, where the sibilants are more present, and this was the first case of a de-esser. It's a compressor that reacts more on those high frequencies. You can of course getting to react here on many other things. You can turn it off, but you can also choose to create a dip. And this is quite smart because you might sometimes say that a frequency is too prominent, but you don't want the compressor to react on that because you want that to breathe. So you can actually dip a certain range, like for example in the low medium area, to let that range breathe. This is quite smart. And we have also a low pass, which is the same as here where we're high pass. Here this is a low pass. This is if, for example, you want the compressor to be totally non-reactive to any high frequency content. So far I didn't find any musical use for that myself, but if ever you have some ideas, let me know in the comments. I would be more happy to hear about it. Also, there is a soft mode where this is basically a reduction of the gain of that selected frequency. So it's pushing that frequency, but not so hard. Other thing which is very nice, and this is this relax mode. We're gonna talk about this into plugin Doctor. Let's dial some very low threshold and some high ratio. Okay, and look at what happens when I'm turning this relax knob. This is like proper limiting, right? It's totally flat. But now that I start to open the relax mode, the curve bends back upwards. See? This is great because it allows the compressor to react on some transients, but not to shave the transients. It will actually leave the dynamics of the higher part as they are, but it will rather compress the body. It's keeping the traditional ratio of what's happening there. And this is a very useful thing in mastering when you have things that are already quite squeezed by a limiter, where the top end is maybe a bit harsh and lacks of clarity. I even like to expand things at mastering stage, or expand before compressing, or expand before limiting to gain back some movement before controlling it better. But this is a very neat feature to do that. And this works hand in hand, but a bit different with this other knob, which is the gain reduction limit. What's happening with the gain reduction limit? This is saying that above a certain amount, it's just stopping the gain reduction. So like you are compressing from the threshold, let's say using easy numbers, -20, I have with a ratio of 20:1. So I should, when getting 20 above, so at 0, I should get 1 above. This is the normal behavior. And so from -20 here, I get like 1 above. Okay, but now I can say I don't want to get more than 10 decibels of gain reduction. So what's happening now? It's compressing from -20 to -10, and from -10 I get back to my classic 1:1 ratio. So this is another way to leave the transients alone. But this is like on-off. While working with the relax, you have a kind of progressive, like a soft knee on that curve. See the difference? This is a bit more musical, a bit more progressive. Like you have the soft knee on the compression phase here. You can dial in some smoothing of the compression to kick in, and you can have a knee from the compression to kick out. So things are not just hard on off. Maybe for drums, if you are processing a drum loop, you don't want this relax and you want just to use the gain reduction limit, because usually hard knees, because drums are really like short transient percussive elements and you want a proper separation between all of them. But while working on a full mix where you can have maybe moments where the bass, the kick and the vocal are playing together and sometimes not, the overall loudness is not on off. It's something that you usually like more to ease in and to ease out, to have a compression that works more naturally, that works more musically. It's not hard on, it's just going with the flow of the music. So this relax feature is something very, very, very neat that and you can also have a combo, of course, of both, having the gain reduction limit and the relax working together to really like craft how the top end of the energy stays intact, stays unprocessed. That's for the relax and the gain reduction limit. Another very neat feature is this auto gain, and why I'm talking about this here is because many plugins have this kind of auto gain, but it's a very filthy trickery. Why I'm saying this is a filthy trickery, it's because most of the poorly designed plugins, not all, for example, I know that TDR and even FabFilter Pro C, they have something a bit more complex under the hood, but many really sneaky manufacturers, what they just do is they say, oh, you lowered the threshold by 10 decibels. I'm gonna increase the gain by 10 decibels. But the problem with that is that if your audio material is not reaching 0 decibel true peak, which is most of the time not the case, well, then you are just increasing the loudness of the output without even starting to compress. And why do I say that this is sneaky? Because I am deeply convinced they do that because you are always tricked by loudness. And so when you do a bypass of that tool in that state with the auto gain, the result is always just louder when turning the compressor on, even with the compressor actually not compressing. And so it's like, oh, whoa effect, it sounds louder, it sounds better, nice tool. So don't be fooled by that, and my usual advice is to always turn those auto gain features off, and then once you have dialed in the color, the groove, the image, the density that you want with the compressor, then you can adjust the gain after to match with the non-processed signal to fit in your mix. Long story short, here what's happening is it's more complex. There's a real analysis of the signal, and the compensation happens in a more complex way than just looking at the threshold. So it's not perfect, because to be working perfectly you need something like meter plugs perception AB, which I love and use daily, that works on a loss calculation before and after the plugin. It takes some time to come, and then you can have a proper loudness compensation. This is also never perfect because human ear might be more sensitive to some frequencies, to some harmonic content. But long story short, loudness compensation is super important, but beware, because most of the plugin developers are just shady about it and are tricking your brain into hearing just things louder. And here it's not the case. Okay, let's look at the next feature, which is also a very great feature. It's the release curve. So let's have a look at the attack release here. Let's dial in some compression, hard compression, and let's look at the release here. Let's go for a bit shorter time. I'm going to increase the frequency so we see just a full line. Okay, so what do we see here? No gain reduction limit, no relax. So we have the full compression happening. Okay, like this. Look at this part now of the curve. See what happens? Maybe you can zoom in this part. Make the release a bit shorter, like that. So you go from linear, from more progressive, to a logarithmic release curve. And this is a way to control the pumping. You get it. Here in a linear mode, you have something that is smoother. And here you can get something that is a bit more faster. You gain more detail. So you are not changing the release time. The time of the compressor is the same. It's really like the curve here. How is this reacting over time? And this is very, very useful in mastering to really get the groove, because mastering compression is something where you want to be gentle and you want the compressor to work with the music, to bounce with the music. So setting the release time is mandatory. Setting it right is super important, but having this extra control gives you an extra depth in that control. This being said, for example, Pro C2 from FabFilter does this, but in a hidden way. What's happening with Pro C from FabFilter is that actually those curves are hidden behind the modes that you are choosing. When you choose another mode, you are changing the curve. This is exponential curve. This is a more linear curve. And this is more logarithmic one. So you see this is pumping. This is why it's called pumping. While mastering, it's smoother. So the tool does this, but you have to go through those settings. And actually those settings affect also the attack times. You see, so the great thing about Unisum is that you have full control over any parameter. You have the analog kind of behaviors. I'm going to talk about it in a second, but without the interlinking of the parameters. And so, for example, Pro C2 or now Pro C3 is a very great tool, but because of that linking, you can say, oh, I dialed my attack time properly. I want to change the release. I'm changing the mode. And now all of a sudden, your attack time doesn't react like you want it. And so the real idea, because I spoke with Hoon on the development of Unisum, was to offer this high level of control, but without the interactions, to be able to really dial in any parameter at any time. It can be musical, it can be reacting. You're going to see some program dependencies and all those kind of things, but it's one parameter, one action. You don't have interaction to get really the most detailed and the most forward control over the tool. Release curve. Dry wet, of course. This is if you want to do some parallel compression. You can also solo a band, whatever. Hygge. This is amazing. I'm going to play you something in context and you're going to hear how it reacts. This is basically one of the distortion passes of Kelvin, Tone Project's distortion unit, and it's adding both even and odd harmonics. Basically, it's a blend of tube and transformers behaviors that has this ability to thicken up, to beef up the low end, thicken up the sound in general, and not sounding harsh or overly distorted. It feels pretty clean while actually just adding some density. All right, so we're back here in Ableton, and we're gonna see a bit what I've spoken about so far, and what I see, we're gonna hear how it sounds. So what I did to help you also hear better, and it's a tool that I'm using every time I'm testing new plugins or even plugins that I know when I want to refresh my ears, is this little effect track, which is delta mode. Basically, I have the dry signal polarity flipped and the effect signal that are summed, and so I can switch from the delta, the difference between those, and the plugin only. So the plugin only, bypass of the plugin, and the delta. So it's handy to really hear what the compressor is changing to the signal. And here we hear clearly it leaves some attack through because we don't have compression at the beginning of the kicks. Then we hear the beef and the pumping. Okay. For example, let me go for full relax. You feel it's cramping more sound. With a relax, it breathes more. Let's listen to the plugin. No relax. Kind of flatter. Listen really to the groove, to the bounce. It feels like it's bouncing more when I dial in the relax. I'm going from minimum to maximum, so you hear the most of the impact of the effect of that feature, right? Can go a bit further, when everything is playing with the hi-hat. Feel it's a bit like closing up the sound. Now let's play with the release curve. Feel the difference in the pumping? Fa, fa, fa. Fa, 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 fa. It changes even the groove on the hi-hat. Here the hi-hat feels straighter. And here a bit more laid back. More groovy. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's really about the vibe of the track. And this one, I like it a bit more groovy. This might be a bit too much, but let's dial in a bit of the relax, a bit of... Oh, let's listen first to the delta. You feel the relaxing of the curve, the pumping. I could shorten the knee. Bypassing. Let's pay attention also to the effect of the sidechain filter on the low end. Of course, the threshold becomes a bit lower. I mean, I would need to lower it because there's less energy. But you feel now it's more, there's more velocity, it's faster in direction. It reacts also more to the melody. While here it's reacting more just to the kick. And so there's a balance to be found. Let's listen now to the plugin. Disclaimer, for the moment I'm leaving the ratio really very high to let you hear the most of the effect of the compression, all right? And this is something I also advise while setting up your compressor, always keeping the ratio highest at the beginning. And once everything is set up, the threshold, the attack and the release, then you can dial in the ratio to find the intensity, the strength of the compression happening. Now pay attention to two important aspects. One is the groove we are printing. The other one is the tightness of the lows, of the impact. Without compression, the low is really like decaying. With the compression, we feel it's like it's compressing, but it's bringing the low end tighter together, and then it expands back, and you have really this stronger impact, tighter impact, and then it breathes instead of do. So pay attention to that in the lows and to the overall groove when I'm bypassing the compressor. Feel the low end. I might try something maybe to make it more obvious, is to EQ silly just to let the lows play. It's really adding movement to the lows. And on the other hand, to the highs, here we have the first really nice set of parameters. Last one I didn't do yet is the Hygge. Let's listen to the delta, because this is very obvious. Now I'm dialing the Hygge. Feel this low? Right, now let's listen to the plugin. See, here it's less obvious because the audio material is already dense, but it's like beefing it up. Now I remove the compressor. What I should do now is actually a little bit of gain match. I'm like 1 and something, so I'm gonna add just like 0.5, 0.6. In this case, I'm not so sure Hygge is adding something because the track is already very heavy in the lows, but you get the point of what it's doing. There are also different quality mode: real-time, which is less processing; high and pristine, which is basically doing some oversampling. Let's have a look at the impulse response. Here you see it's very little, but so it's oversampling with linear phase filters, and so you have a bit of pre-ringing. But to be honest, this is very acceptable. We are in a ballpark in which, let's go back to the highest, the pristine. So we have like 0.4 milliseconds of pre-ringing and same of post-ringing, which is very shorter than the ear's integration time. So basically, plugin Doctor measures this, but our ear will never hear any smearing on the transients because of that. So you can really trust this tool while using it even in pristine oversampled mode. The linear phase filters have no perceptive incidence to the sound. This pre-ringing is just measured but will never be heard by any ears, any human ears. Maybe some bats could hear it, but whatever. Okay, so now let's get into the juicy part of Unisum, where the magic happens, and this is this lower part. Oh yeah, I just forgot, you can of course link or unlink if you want to use it as separate dual mono and compress different settings on the left and the right. This is something that is never going to be the case in mastering, but what's the case in mastering is mid-side mode. And if you use it in mid-side mode, then unlinking might be interesting, because you might want to compress differently the mid part and the side parts. For example, having a mid part that is a bit more pumping, for example, you have more of the groove from the kick, etc., and you want the sides to be a bit more controlled, so maybe a bit more compressed, a bit lower threshold, because of course there's less energy, and also maybe slower time constant, so you are controlling. Or on the other hand, you want the sides to be pumping. This is up to you, but I mean, you have this possibility. So those features are basically everything that controls the detection signal here and the attack and release modifiers. Let's start by the detector. As I said earlier, usually we have this sidechain filter in the detection pass. That is a way to get the compressor to react more to some higher frequency than the lows. But this is the same, but in a much more advanced way. We have in fact 3 bands. You set the higher cut and the lowest crossover here. So you have the high above, for example, here above 3.9. You have the mids from 3.9 to 122 and the lows from 122 till 20 Hertz. So these are the 3 bands. And for each band, you have a weighting. So this is basically simply, you could show it like, let's do it like this. Here I say 200. Here I say, for example, 4000. Well, I would have like a low shelf filter at 200 here, 200. And I said what to 4000, and here 4000, and this would be filters that I have on the detection pass, on the sidechain signal. So you can say you want the compressor to react more on the lows, more on the highs, less on the lows. Basically, that's just here the weight. It's the impact of those bands to the detection. Of course, here I'm doing in the EQ, it's on the audible signal, but in the plugin, it's not on the audible signal, it's really the detection pass. So if I would here take out the lows, now the compressor will never react to the kick. You see, it's reacting to the hi-hats. Or now it's reacting to the melody, to the stabs. So it's compressing broadband, it's compressing the full range from 20 Hertz to 20 kilohertz. So the whole audio is getting compressed. But what is triggering the compression, it's different depending on the weight that I'm pushing into any of those bands, right? This is the start. This is band dependent detection. Now, what about these tools here? These tools allow the compressor to react either on the RMS loudness or on the peaks. Many compressors have a set feature. Sometimes you can shift between RMS or peak for the detection. Is it if you want, for example, to compress a vocal and do some more macro compression, you might want something that is more working on the RMS level. So RMS is root mean square. It's the average of the loudness. So it's on a longer scale. It's smoother, while peak is really on the transients, on the level of the peak. So when you are compressing drums, usually you want the compressor to react more on the peaks. But when you are evening a vocal take, you want to have both compressors, in fact, on a vocal take. You might have one on the peaks, very short, for serial compression, and one on the RMS on the longer scale. So you compress a little bit the peaks and you compress the bigger scale. But here, this is the beauty, you can have both. Let's check the melody, for example. I'm going to put the weighting totally on the melody. This is a good example. So for the moment, it's working on the RMS level, but not so smooth. You can actually have a smoothing of this value. So pretty smooth. I'm going to go for fast attack and release time so you can even see how it's moving here, right? This is reacting like it would be on peaks. It's RMS, but it's so fast that it's like it would be on peaks. Now, what if I turn this down? You feel it's less febrile. It's smoother. Again, high. This is really like triggering every peak. So on the RMS signal, we can have a control over the speed at which it's doing the integration of the loudness. This is great because I can say, okay, I like this melody. I want to control it a little bit, but I want it also to breathe. And so this is, no matter the attack and the release time, it's really on the detection signal. It's the shape of the signal that will be sent to the volume control of the compressor. And now I hear and I feel it's more musical here, even with those very short attack and release time. But I might think it's not the case here, but I might think that there's still a bit of sizzle in my melody. And so this would be then the peak signal. And now you see actually the LED is showing you it's only triggering on the peaks here. And I can now blend between only the RMS value and the peaks until I find something where the peaks are properly controlled but not overcompressed, and the release is the body is also in shape but not jiggery. And so when there is a higher peak, when the crest factor is more important, when the dynamic is stronger, then it starts to react on the peaks. And this is great because it allows you to have both a micro and a macro control over the dynamics. Without. And now I might add a bit of the attack time to let it breathe. Or now that I have this dialed in, I might say, but I want the compressor to react also to my kick drum for the bounce that I had before. I have a bit of that pump. And now I'm adding the control of the highs. And now both the low end and the medium are triggering my compression, but not in the same way. Very, very musical already. Next, we're going to talk about this feature, which is, to my knowledge, the only tool with Tokyo Down Kotelnikov Tokyo Down Record, so TDR Kotelnikov compressor, the Gentleman Edition, the GE. These are the two only compressors, to my knowledge, doing FDR, which is frequency dependent ratio. This is something really important to understand, because so far we spoke about the EQ and the weight, and this will determine when the compressor starts to compress, when some part of the signal reaches above the threshold. And now the ratio will determine how it compresses. So it's not compressing that frequency range differently from the others. It's always a broadband compressor. So all frequencies are compressed with the same intensity. But when some frequencies are playing, the ratio will be increased or decreased. So the whole program material will be more or less compressed. This is why I said the EQ in the sidechain signal determines when it is compressing, and this frequency dependent ratio determines how strong, how hard it is compressing. Let me give you a little tour here, and let's listen maybe to the delta for that one. In this case, let's start with something really flat. So all frequencies at 0. This is a usual compressor. Okay. Now I can say that I want a stronger ratio, for example, when the highs are playing. You feel it's more jittery. The low end always reacts the same, but there is more movement when the highs are, and you see it here. Actually, this is around the ratio knob here in the center. You see this is displaying the changes in ratio. I'm increasing the ratio, and I could even do the opposite. Say I want the compressor to be really relaxed when the kick plays. Add a bit of more weight on the kick. Let's now listen to the signal. Without compression. Okay, now, and this is where this thing is really insane, because obviously there's a question of how do you go from one strong to a gentler ratio? How do you apply these changes? Do you apply them in a fixed way, in a relative, in a fast, in a slow way? And this is here, this control you have here. So in this case, I have a very low ratio when the kick is playing, higher ratio when the mediums are playing, and I'm pretty fast. To my taste, honestly, medium fast, slow peak, and adaptive RMS plus peak are the three settings that I find work the best in most cases. Let's have a look. You will see. By default, you can look, if you should hear the difference, but as a starting point, you can also look just at the gain reduction, and it's going to be a good indicator. I'm going to dial something very strong. Let's do it like that. I'm going to put more weight on the kick. You still see the jitter and the wiggle here, depending on the notes. Now I'm going to go for something medium, and I'm going to shift between them while playing. You feel here it's already a bit stronger. Here it's pumping more. I get it really to react. Let's play the delta. Maybe it's easier to understand with the delta. You feel still the lag of the kick, but there is a bit of movement of the mediums. More movement of the mediums. And here you feel like a tremolo. Back to slow. Slow plus peak. I find there's something quite musical about that one, because you feel the drag when things are more fat, and then still you have some movement. It's kind of more dynamic in the changes. And then adaptive RMS and peak. Back to slow. You feel slow, it's a bit dragging, and it's normal, it's slow. The difference is slow. So I tend to find that for mastering work, it might be a bit too smooth, depending on the style of music, but for electronic music where you want some punch. So as I said, medium fast, I have this kind of energy. I'm going to play after the plugin alone, so you hear, but I like the delta because it's an eye-opener of the movement, right? So pa 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 pa. Okay, now let's listen to the plugin. Slow. I like the way it has this kind of overall movement, and then in between, depending on the stabs, and so it's really breathing with the music. Let's play an earlier part where we go from one to the other. Here we are just in the bounce. I love it. It's really like we can start to find this very smooth and sweet balance between getting the kick and the low groove bouncing and yet getting some of that higher energy movement in the mediums. It's all a question of very fine settings between the ratio and the weighting and the sidechain filter. But I mean, come on, isn't this incredible? You feel the vibe that we are starting to print in that track with very delicate compression. This is totally flat. And now this. So very, very great features here. Of course, there's a way to link RMS and peak gains, so both for this and this, in order to have them work like a broadband compressor. So you can just dial in the same amount of RMS detection and the balance between RMS and peak, and just adjust the weight. You don't need to change everything. It's really depending on the track and how far you want to push things. And now let's talk about the attack and release modifiers. So this is somehow inspired by optical compressors, or more generally by what we call program-dependent compressors. What is a program-dependent compressor? It's a compressor in which the behavior of the compressor will be dictated by the musical material or by the previous state of the compressor. Usually this was achieved in optical compressors with the Opto cell that has to charge and discharge, and that's kind of what we call hysteresis. It's here also the memory effect. It comes from the same idea. It's the more the Opto cell is charged, the stronger it is charged, the more time it takes to discharge. And so for an Opto compressor, usually it's the stronger the gain reduction, the slower the release time will be. And this allows the compressor to act in a more transparent, less obvious, less pumping way, right? But usually because of the feedback type of designs on those optical compressors, attack is also changing, and the whole compressor is living thanks to that design. And it's very nice, it's musical, yet it's not so predictable. And here again, the idea that Rune developed in this specific tool is a way to get these kinds of results, those musical movements, but still having full control on any of those parameters. So what does that mean? Basically, you have a way to change the attack time and the release time of the compressor depending on the loudness of the signals or the difference in loudness of a signal. To illustrate the attack release modifiers, the best thing I could think of was this example where I start with 2 bursts of white noise without any compressor. They are flat, as we can see. They are one louder, one quieter. And let's first turn the compressor on without the modifiers. We see one is getting way above the threshold, another one a little bit above. I would say like something like 10, 15 decibels of difference, right? Look at the curves for the moment. We see there's a very short attack on the strong one, and a quieter one has also a short attack. But the display isn't that obvious, right? Okay. So now let's dial in this attack modifiers. Without. Look at the shape of the attack here. And look what happens when I turn it on. Okay, now I'm gonna adjust the loud time. This is basically, I have an offset here that is the crossover point between the louder and the quieter parts. And I can now adjust the length of the attack by this multiplication factor. I'm gonna remove the tools here. So this is gonna shorten the attack when it's loud, and this is gonna expand it when it's quiet, or the opposite, depending on the settings I'm dialing. Let's have a look to that. Let me turn on this one up. You see now we have a very long attack. And if I turn this one down on the quiet part, not only is it shaving the quieter part of this one, but it's also changing the curve when the curve drops below the level set by this crossover point. Let's have a look. See, this goes down and it's getting fast. So I'm changing the behavior of the attack time of the high part, but also of the quiet part. The quiet is really quiet and very directly compressed. Or on the opposite, I'm compressing very shortly this one, and I'm expanding the quieter part. I can adjust the curve. A good example was this one, so we can really see the point where it's changing. Let's change the crossover point. The more to the left, the more I am in the loud part. So the longer the decay is happening, the longer the attack is of the loud part. Let's make it very loud. So here, even the quiet part feels a bit like loud because I have a long attack time. While on the opposite, or if I would make it up contrary, now this one goes very fast, and then we have a longer decay. You see? And if I move this now to the left, the attack will be shorter. This is for the attack, and same goes obviously for the release. So not only do we have control on the ratio depending on the frequencies, but we have also now control on the timing of the attacks depending on the level. This is usually we had in something like the LA2A, we had a dual stage release. First part of the sound decays at some speed and another part a bit slower. So the first release is fast and the second one is slower. But here it's different. It's really like depending on the loudness or the amount of gain reduction, the release curve is not the same. And we have a smoothing like we had in the multiband detector, where you could choose how fast does the frequency dependent ratio shift. Here we have an envelope smoothing that allows us actually to smooth the time reaction between those two. And this is very, very fast reacting. Here the reaction is slower. It's more bouncing slowly with the music. This is very sharp. And so maybe with some sharp reaction, I maybe want to increase the attack time of the loud parts. Alright, so this is attack and release time control depending on the average loudness of the detection signal. But there's more. There's more. As I said, with optical compressors, you had this hysteresis, the memory effect of when something has been compressed for a long time, the release will be longer. to avoid excessive pumping? Well, this is exactly what we have here. Look. It modulates the release time based on the duration and the intensity of the compression. Turn to the left to reduce. This is opposite of the traditional optical compressor. And as it said, positive values mimics the behavior of optical compressors. So if I push this up, the release is going to be longer when the compression is stronger. In the case of the attack time on optical compressors, if it was compressing strong, the attacks were a bit shorter. This is the whole purpose of the program dependent behavior. And in the case of this tool, we can do the same, or we can go opposite and to let things breathe more if you want maybe strong compression but not choking things. Let's have a listen to that. No memory effect. And now it's so strong that actually the release is so long that, look, we are always in release phase because we have enough compression to keep always release phase. So this is not working at all. It's just like lowering the signal. This is not what we want. And here are maybe something that is bouncing a little bit. Maybe we can try to apply this to the musical example of before, now that you understood the behavior and that we could see with the noise. This is also great. We always have these LED indicators showing us which part is triggering. So my purpose is to try to find just that tiny balance where we just see the LED blinking on the peaks. And in fact, what I want here is to increase the attack time, in this purpose to keep again this live and this energy, and just making the compression a bit stronger with a bit shorter attack times on the quieter parts. And maybe I can listen to the delta for this. It's going to be more obvious. So what I'm trying here is to increase the release and to increase the attack time when the hits are stronger. So from time to time when there's one stronger hit, the transient and the punch goes a bit more through, and the release takes a bit more time. So it's like impacting, and I don't want it to be jittery. That's not bad. So let's now play with the memory effect. You feel how now everything is lagging, because the release is always longer. Let me remove this. This is jiggly. So a nice thing as well, before getting further and listening to the music, is that all those parameters affect the time, but you have a display of them. So let's have a look at the attack time, for example. Let's start by no memory effect. And you see the attack is barely moving. Now, if I'm going to a negative effect, you see how the stronger compression is clamping the attack time. I remember I'm still listening to the delta. We can listen to the plugin effect. It's compact, really compact. We have a strong density, a very strong loop, but maybe this is not the kind of feel we are looking for this beat. Let's now increase the attack time. These things are really the kind of things that happen usually in an analog compressor with program dependency, or digital as well. But you don't have the control and this granularity on the control of the attack and the release. Remember, we have the dual stage attack, the dual stage release, the memory effect on the attack and the memory effect on the release, and they can be opposite direction. Let's dial in the release. Now I'm doing this negatively. This means that the stronger the compression is happening, the shorter the release. So I'm increasing the pumping effect. Let's listen to the delta. You feel it's jiggly. Now let's increase the memory effect. Okay, let's listen how this sounds in context. I'm gonna increase the ratio a little bit. Without. You feel how it's making the whole thing actually more dynamic. It's compressing, but it's making more movement, and a movement that is not static. It's not the same all the time. It's really depending on everything that's happening in the music, depending on the low-end content, depending on the speed and the crest factor on the low and the medium, depending on the difference in loudness of things. We have something that now is incredibly organic and incredibly reactive to the music, yet super tight, super timed, and super controlled for every parameter. Without. You might find that it's a bit too jiggly, a bit too fast and reactive, but it's really for the purpose of letting you hear properly how it's sounding. In a general case, I would open a little bit more the attack time. And of course, this memory effect, we also have the speed at which it's reacting. So I'm going to go back into the delta mode. Likewise, we had here for the ratio where you could have the speed of the changes of the ratio. Now we have the speed of the changes of the memory effect. How they say it, they phrase it properly, like sets the modulation speed for the memory effect. So how fast do we apply this memory effect? Slow. You feel easing in and out. You feel a bit the opening of the attack and the release. It's breathing a bit. Okay, let's go too fast. You feel more the pumping, right? Let's listen in context now that we understand this movement. For example, the delta mode, I like the fast, but here when we listen to the plugin, I really love the slow mode. It's kind of following the music. We still have this bouncing and this movement, but on a macro level, when things are rising and decreasing, it's kind of following a bit more the music. Slow. Fast. It's reacting on everything. It's changing too fast. Here we have a kind of swell. Beautiful, really beautiful. This is all kind of details that are barely audible. And yet they change the whole feel. We have now the pump and the movement, but this movement is not static. This movement is expanding and compressing. And we have something that is like working with the music. I mean, I told it in the beginning of the video, I'm amazed by this tool, but getting this kind of results is not even, I wouldn't see it as compression. It's really like enhancement of vibe and presence and dynamic control that is changing the way the music breathes. It's adding something that is like you would do small automation curves through the whole track to make gentle moves, right? Let's listen without and with. Without. This is flat and straight. It's dancing with the music. Okay. Attack time. Loud, quiet, the crossover, the memory effect. Now let's talk about the transients. And so this is a bit weirder, less obvious. The idea here is, how do the strong transient make the shift on the attack time? So if you are happy with the attack timing, but you just want to shave off the transients, right? It's not changing really the body and the punch, but really those transients. It's linked somehow. I don't know how this was developed, but I feel it's linked with the crossover level. It's changing the weight the transient has in those loud parts. And you see it actually, you see it. It lets some transients get more detection and getting... Let's listen to the delta. You feel now it's clamping more on the transients. And here it's more relaxed. Right, now the last feature we have in this crazy control is that there actually a second envelope that is running in parallel. And the idea is, if you don't want it, you just put this at 0 and then you have just one envelope happening and you get a snappier result. But as soon as you start to dial in the second envelope, it's blending another one and you can adjust the time constant of that envelope. Let's listen to the delta again. I think delta for this is a good example. One envelope. Second envelope. And you see now this is totally grayed out because this is the only control happening. Imagine I want something that is really squeezed for some parallel action. So very shaving off everything, right? Straight, reacting to everything. And the first, breathing with all the movement. Maybe it's not the best example. Let's do the opposite, maybe something that is really open. Very long attack and very pumping for the bounce. Oomfa, oomfa, oomfa. Okay, and the first, this is clamping on the meats, right? And now I have a balance of the two. Let's listen now to the plugin. Now we find a very delicate blend between this kind of ongoing pulse. This is what I dialed in with this envelope. Just the groove, the bounce of that long reaction attack time and punchy release, unka, unka, unka. And then the other is like the leveling and the music follower. So we have a blend between that ongoing groove and the control. Groove only. Blending in some control. super delicate, super gentle. This is smoothing things out in a very beautiful way, I believe. Last feature I want to talk is in the channel linking. So basically there are different ways compressor use channel linking in the detection circuits. Some are taking the sum of left and right divided by 2, and this is the average of the signal. And so when there is a very strong peak on the left or a very strong peak on the right, it's actually reacting a bit less because, well, it's the averaging of left and right signals. Some other compressors are working with the maximum of left or right. And so as soon as one channel reaches the maximum peak loudness, this is used as the maximum loudness of the detection, and both signals are getting turned down. So it's taking down more of energy on the other channel, but the maximum level is more fixed, right? When you have the averaging, you can have peaks that go a bit higher. When you take the max, you don't have them. Here we have a filter that allows to diffuse the sound energy and to say how much highs or low frequency get used into the linking. So you can say, if for example, this is usually the way I would go is you turn this to the right and it's unlinking the highs. It means that actually only the lows which you want in mono will be both used as the linking parameter. And this means that you could have a bit more discrepancies on the highs. This won't turn down the compressor. It's letting the stereo of the stereo image, the width, breathe a little more. You can do the opposite, but to be honest, I don't see the purpose because, well, you want compactness and you want blend on your lows. So let's listen to the delta again. This is a nice way to hear it. Pay attention to the stereo image between lows and highs. This is a nice part to hear it well. Let's play that. You have the ping pong delay and we feel it, right? Now it's more pa 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 pa. And here we have more the ping pong effect. Let's listen now, not the delta but the audio result. Versus this. So this is a nice way to not use any mid-side or any other stereo widening tools, but just the way the detection is happening and the linking between the left and the right allows a bit of more movement, while keeping the lows still punchy and tight in the center. They are not moving left to right, even at strong loudnesses. Let's listen to the delta. The lows are not moving, only the high part. Without any compression. And yeah, the last thing I didn't talk about is the RMS and peak. This is a way to unlink when there are some peaks. So the idea is it's only working if you don't have a full linking. So you have to unlink a little bit. And if they are a little bit unlinked, the left and the right, then you can say that you let the peaks more or less linked. So this means here only the average loudness is going to be linked. And again, this is a way to get a bit more of movement when you have peaks on the left or on the right. This will be less controlling the other side, so you can have more compression movement. Let's listen to that one. It's compacting a little bit. These are tiny details that change a little bit on the stereo feel, and it's not really the stereo feel, but it's how much one peak on one side will get the compressor to compress the other side or how much loudness averaging on one side. This tool offers both options, but I feel in 99% of the cases that I use it, you want this RMS link strong and you want more like unlinking the peaks. You don't want to link the peaks and let the RMS unlink because you want homogeneity in the stereo image. So this is it. I think it was a pretty long tour on this tool, and more than this tool, on explaining concepts and idea behind dynamic control. So as I said, for me, this is really like the grail, the pinnacle of any compressor, because it offers so many controls, so many detailed and refined ways to gently or very strongly modify the dynamic of a signal, but not only the dynamic, the stereo image, the color with the Hygge and the saturation part, the way it behaves differently on the bands. It's really, I see it more like an envelope for your music that is gonna shape through time, through space, and through height how this envelope is gonna let your music breathe and embrace it. I hope you like this content. If any of those concepts that I talked about feels blurry or unclear, there are many chapters before in my compression Bible covering all of those points. Be sure to find the proper chapter and get to know the content and the information that you are lacking to understand this video. This is really, for me, the end point of everything that I've been talking so far in my compression Bible. Also, please bear in mind, making these videos take a lot of time, so be sure to leave a little like, to follow the page. Many people are watching those videos but not subscribing to the channel. This is helping me and is getting some motivation to continue making this kind of content. Of course, sharing this with friends is also a very nice thing. I hope you liked it. I hope to see some comments and some questions popping in the comment sections. I wish you all the best, and I see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.